Hello everybody and welcome to this Class 66 tutorial for Dovetail Games Train Sim World 3. If this happens to be the first video you've seen by me, then my name's Richard and I'm a freight train driver and former passenger train driver based in the southeast of England. I'm also a father to 4 wonderful children, which is where the Dabrail name comes from. So without further ado, let's jump into Train Sim World 3 and have a look at the Class 66. So here we are in the training centre of Train Sim World 3, one of the very nice new features of the game. We won't talk too much about that. There's plenty of tutorials and YouTube videos available if you want to find out more about the training centre feature. But instead we are going to jump straight onto the Class 66. We have got two to choose from. We've got the EWS liveried 66 over there, and we've got the default liveried 66 over here. For the purpose of this tutorial, we're just going to jump on this one here, as it's closest. And I'm a real life train driver, and train drivers don't like walking. So let's jump up. So this tutorial is going to be split into 3 parts. The first part of this tutorial is going to be telling you how to get the engine started and get the train moving, which should take 2 or 3 minutes. The second part of the tutorial, we're going to go through some basic fault finding. So if you can't get your train to move or your brakes are stuck on, I'm going to sort of tell you what could be causing that. And in the third part of the video, we're going to be having a look at some of the more advanced features on the trains, such as the train length indicator, the traction motor cutout features, brakes timings, and bits and bobs like that. So I do drive Class 66s in real life, but for the purpose of this video and keeping it simple, I am going to be referring to the 66 as it is in game rather than drawing comparisons with real life. I will, however, be releasing another video which is going to be a complete 66 prep, so everything we would do in real life on the locomotive, which is going to be a lot more in detail. So if you kind of want to see a lot more in detail and sort of a lot more comparisons to real life and how the game compares, it's pretty good, I'll tell you that now, then go and check out that video. But for the purpose of this one, we're keeping it simple, stupid, and we're just going as it is in game. So here we are in the 66 cab. As we can hear, the engine is not running. So when you get into the 66, it's going to be in various stages of readiness. Some scenarios the engine will be ready and you'll just need the engine will be running and you'll just need to get in the train and go. Other times you'll need to start it from cold like this. So first thing we want to do is put our master key in. It's called the reverser handle because it is the handle for the reverser, but in reality this is your key for the locomotive. We then want to check that these switches here are in the down position or off. If these switches are not in the down position, the locomotive will not start. The next thing we want to do is press and hold the engine start button. And we can hear there that something's happening. That is the pre-lube cycle on the engine, so it's just pumping fuel and oil around the engine to get it lubricated before it starts. And in a minute we'll hear the klaxon. And finally the familiar ying 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 of a 66. After you've been sat on one for a 12-hour shift, that's rather an annoying sound. The sounds are very good in this. Very impressed with the sounds actually in Train Sim World 366. The sounds are really good. Okay, so once your engine has started, you want to push these switches up. So these switches need to be down to start the engine, but they need to be up to move the train. So they are all now up. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to tell the train that we want the brakes to work. So sometimes with 66s you might have 2 of them together. So basically we need to tell the train which 66 is leading and which 66 we wanted to for the brakes to work. So we go up to our computer here, which is known as the EM2000. Using the directional arrows we navigate to brake cutout, press select, cut in, and then we can exit that screen. And what we've done now is we've basically told the computer this is the lead locomotive and we would like the brakes to work, the brake controller to work and be active on this locomotive. So again, quick guide here. In order to get the locomotive running, we've got our engine running, we've got our switches in the up position. We're going to want to release all of our brakes. And there's 3 brake controllers you need to look out for on here. Parking brake is your first one. That's your parking brake indicator. Parking brake is currently on. Press and hold that. Parking brake is now off. If you're drawing forward and you're finding that you're getting a lot of resistance, could be because you've left the parking brake on, but you will get a fair old squeal and squeak on the wheels if you do that. The next thing we're going to want to do is check our direct brake, make sure that is in the release position, and then we're going to want to charge our brake pipe up. So this is your brake pipe control. This is your main brake indicator for the whole train. Freight trains and locomotive haul trains, most of them, if not all of them, work on the principle of positive air pressure in order to release the brakes. So in order to release the brakes, we need 5 bar of air pressure in the brake pipe. Then when we apply the brakes, we reduce the pressure to apply them. It's a fail-safe system, because if we was to lose air en route or the train was to break apart, the brake pipe would empty and the brakes would apply fully. So we come down to our control panel here, and we're looking for this lever here, the auto air brake. So there's 3 positions on the auto air brake on a Class 66. You have your hold position, which is the middle position, which is exactly where it is now. You have your release position, which is pull back, and we have our apply position, which is push forward. What's worth noting on here is as soon as you let go of this controller, it will automatically spring back to the middle hold position. So in order to release the brakes, we need to pull it back to the release position, and we're watching our brake pipe controller come up there. Once our brake pipe control gauge reaches 5 bar, we can then let go of the handle and we have got a full brake release. We're now going to pop the train into forward, a couple of notches of power, and all being well, it should start to creep forward. So, there we go guys. And in order to stop the train, of course, you've got your automatic brake controller there. Push that forward, watching your brake pipe. If you want more brake pressure, push it forward further. If you want less brake, then pull it back to release. You can kind of just play about with that to give it as much or as little brake as you need to. The only other thing we'd want to check as well is our illuminations. So up here, daytime, yard work, nighttime, and we've got tail lights there as well. So that's the one thing I didn't do before moving the train. I didn't check the illuminations. So guys, very quick recap for you. In order to start the engine on a 66, key in, switches in the down position, key and down, key and down, key and down. Press and hold your engine start button. Once the engine's started and you get that horrid ying 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 sound, push all of these switches into the up position. You're then coming into your menu on here. Going into your main menu that you've got there. We're going over to brake cutout, and we're making sure our brakes are cut in. All being well there, parking brake off, red button, check you've got the off indicator. Check your direct brake is fully back in the release position, and then pull and hold your automatic brake into the release position. Reverser into forward, couple of notches of power, and away you go. And that is the basic startup guide to the Class 66. That's how to get the engine started and how to get the train moving. So just check all of those things. If you can't get it to move, just check all of those things, and hopefully you'll find one of them is wrong and you should be in business. So that is the end of the basic bit of the tutorial of how to get the engine started and how to get it moving. So we're now going to move on to fault finding. So if you've been playing with the locomotive, it's the whole point of the simulator. If you've been playing with the locomotive and mucking about with the controls, you may find there's a couple of things that are going to stop you being able to move the train, and I'm going to show you some of those now. So when starting the engine, we'll stop the engine now. So here are some of the fault finding things that are worth looking for. You've got your switches in the down position. Your key is in and you go to press the engine start. And nothing happens. Nothing at all. What's going on? The one thing you want to check in this situation is that your engine stop plunger is not pushed in. You see that it says engine stop pressed. If that engine stop plunger is pushed in, it will not allow you to start the engine. So just make sure that engine stop plunger is in the out position. Then if we try and start the engine, it should work. There we go, guys. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, so make sure that's out. Take the key in, take the key out, put it back in, reset it. If in doubt, turn it off, turn it back on again. That always works. And we're up and running again. Yeah, so engine will not start. Key out, key back in again. Check these switches are down. Check that the engine stop button is not pushed in. That will stop you from moving. So the next thing that will stop the engine from starting. So let's presume the engine started, but you can't get your brakes off. A couple of extra things to check here that we didn't go over in the basic part of the tutorial. So make sure your brakes are definitely cut in. So brake cut in. Brakes definitely cut in. That's very essential. If the brakes are not cut in, you'll be going nowhere. I should have that meme on the screen now, shouldn't I? A couple of other things you're going to want to check. Emergency stop plunger, which I've just depressed. You've had that nice whoosh of air. If the emergency stop plunger is pushed in, doesn't matter how much you pull that brake release back, you're not going to get a brake release. As you can see there, I'm pulling that back, but we are not getting any pressure in our brake pipe on the right. So check that emergency stop plunger valve is closed. And you see the brake pipe coming up there. The other thing we're going to want to check, and again, you shouldn't find any scenarios starting like this, but if you've been playing with a locomotive, which is fine, you may have inadvertently done this, is that the brake test switch up here is not in the test position. If the brake test switch is in the test position, you apply the brakes, they will apply perfectly well, but when you try and release them, as you can see there, they'll let me release, but as soon as I flick back into the hold position, it's just dropping straight off again. So there we go, coming up in the release. As soon as we let go of that, you can see the brake pipe starting to drop off there. So check that you're not in the test position. So, advanced, can't get the brakes off. Advanced things to check. Check your brakes are cut in, check your emergency plunger isn't depressed, and check that your brake test switch is in the service position. The other thing you're going to want to check is you're going to want to check, if you've done all of that and you still can't get them to come off, you're going to want to check your back cab. Now essentially what we've got with the 66 is we've got one locomotive with two cabs, and what you do in one cab can affect what happens in the other. So for example, if I press the emergency brake plunger here, take our key out and go for a walk down the other end of the train, I think you know where we're going with this, guys. We're going to jump out the train, woohoo, straight in front of the network. I wouldn't advise doing that in real life. Look both ways and make sure you're wearing your high visibles. If we jump in the other end of the train, engine's already running, obviously we don't need to do that. We can pop our key in, try and recharge the brakes, nothing happens. So we check our brakes are cut in, brakes are cut in, nothing happens. We can't recharge that brake pipe, and the reason is because that emergency plunger in the back cab is in the down position. That is why we can't recharge our brake pipe. Same principle with the direct brake. If that direct brake is applied in this cab, so we've applied the direct brake in this cab, we go back to the other cab, not killing myself by the networker, back into this cab, we can release that brake plunger, put our key in, and I'm aware I didn't take the key out at the other end. It's not going to let me put the key in this end until I've taken it out at the other end, which is correct. There's two keys on the locomotive, it's bad news. I drive these in real life, you wouldn't think that, would you? I'm so disorganised. Let's take the key out. There we go, reverse the handle out. Back up the other end of the train. Reverse the handle in. We will be able to charge our brake pipe now. So you can see the brake pipe coming up. However, because we've applied the direct brake or the locomotive only brake in the back cab, the brakes on the locomotive have not released. So that's something to be aware of. So if you can't get your brakes off and you've checked everything, go into your back cab, check that your direct brake is released, and check that your emergency brake valve is closed. So if we head to the back cab of the train now, head to the back of the train now, we're going to release that brake, and instantly the brake cylinders come off. Now if you'd done this in real life, then you'd get out, there's nothing holding the train, so the train would start to roll away, so you'd want to make sure you've applied the parking brake or some other brake before you do that. So that is the kind of more advanced fault finding guide there, guys. I think I've pretty much covered everything. So if you can't get your engine started, the other thing you want to check is that you've got that plunger out. Welcome, yeah, whatever that said. I'm using my streaming software to record this video and I haven't turned off the subscriber overlays. So someone's made it into the tutorial video. Well done. So yeah, there we go, guys. If you can't get your engine started, the other thing to check is just make sure that that plunger is out. And if you can't get your brakes off, check your emergency brake valve and your direct brake, especially in the back cab. That would be, in my opinion, that would be a really good place to start. So that is it for part 2, which is kind of your fault finding guide. We are now going to head over to part 3. We're going to jump onto the South Eastern High Speed and get on a service, and I'm going to show you some of the other features on this train. So here we go, guys. We are on 66065, just waiting to come off the Isle of Grain branch by Hoo Junction, and I'm going to show you some of the other features on board this Class 66 locomotive. Everything I'm going to tell you in this bit is not relevant to the basic game, but if you do want to play the game in a little bit more detail, a little bit more realism, this is kind of where you want to head to. So let's jump back into the cab. Actually, on the outside, first thing to note on a Class 66 is that you've got 2 cabs. You've got a number 1 end and a number 2 end. And the easiest way of identifying those is the distance between, when I get my camera angle sorted out here, the distance between the window and the cab door. So you can see there between the window and the cab door you've got quite a lot of space. That is your number 1 cab. And on the other side, between your window and your cab door, you haven't got very much space at all. And that is your number 2 cab. The number 1 cab is sometimes referred to as the big end. So what we want to do is head to the number 1 cab, which is where we are now. And behind the driver's seat on a number 1 cab, you will find these fuse cabinets. And these are pretty real to life as well. The fuses are... There's a couple that you haven't got in the real locomotives. The ETCS one I don't think is there on the real locomotives, but otherwise they're pretty good. And what we want to do is get the safety systems in. So your DSD's down there. Your driver safety device, vigilance device, dead man's handle. And the one that most people are going to want on is your AWS, which is right there. Close that up and we'll pop ourselves back down in the seat. Press Q or click AWS acknowledgement. So our AWS is now fully operational, which means we've got all of our safety systems in. So we're going to have a quick look now at the EM2000 screen. So it says Electromotive. This is the EM2000 screen, and this tells us various things about the locomotive and allows us to control various elements. We've already seen the brake cutout feature on this. So the first thing we're going to check is data meters. This is a very good screen. I said I wasn't going to compare to real life, but if we're driving in real life, this is normally the screen that we would have up and operational. And what this tells us is our throttle position, so that's the position of the throttle in the cab. As you can see, we're in the idle position at the moment, and the position that the locomotive governor is actually giving us. There could be situations where we're asking for notch 8, but the governor's only given us notch 3 because the engine's too cold or something like that. The other kind of main things on here that we're worried about is our locomotive speed is indicated on there. Our engine RPM, so we're currently 199 to 200 revs per minute. It's only a 2-stroke engine on a Class 66, incidentally, and it only revs to about 1,000 RPM, just under 1,000 RPM. So it's a very low revving engine. And underneath that is the engine horsepower, so that'll tell us how much horsepower we're getting out of the train. Normally about 3,000 horsepower. So that's a really good screen, and we would normally drive with that one up so we can keep an eye on what the train's doing. So if we exit that or press our main menu button, we can then come back to the main screen. We've got unit information. And this is telling us we're 66065. We are 66065, corresponds with what we've got on the outside. It is telling us this is the EM2000. It's telling us it's 10:47 GMT on the 6th of September 2022, and we have got 6,399 litres of fuel. At current prices, that is a lot of money. So that's not really any relevance to the game, but that's just quite nice to know. The other one you can explore is traction cutout, which is modelled in the game and does work quite interestingly. So your traction cutout screen enables you to isolate traction motors on the locomotive. So there are 6 traction motors on the Class 66. There's one on each axle basically. And as you can see here, we've got truck 1. If we press the next button, we've got truck 2. And basically that's bogie 1 and bogie 2. They're American Canadian built locomotives. So they refer to them as trucks rather than bogies. So if we want to disable all the traction motors on a certain truck, we can be in truck 1, as you can see by the arrows, press disable, and then it's gone down cut out on all of them. If we put those back in, we can also use our directional arrows to go to the individual traction motors and cut them out. It's quite a nice feature because the traction motor cutout does affect the performance of the train. If you cut out half the traction motors, you will only get half the performance. And there are some instances, if you've got traction motors isolated, if you've decided you want to do a bit of you want to run with faults and stuff like that and try that out. There are situations where you will not get up hills because you've not got enough traction power. So that's quite a nice little feature, and it's fully operational. You can play around with that. English metric allows you to change over the measurements between English and metric. That's pretty straightforward. Brake cutout we've already looked at a bit earlier on with regards to setting up the train. Brake timing is the next one we'll explore. So there's 2 sets of brake timings on locomotive. You have pass timings or passenger timings and goods timings. Now, the obvious assumption there would be freight trains running goods and passenger trains running pass, but no, it doesn't quite work like that. It's down to how it's called brake timers. It's down to how quick and how slow the brakes release and apply. So a train running in pass timings, the brakes on the locomotive and the brakes on the wagons will apply and release a lot quicker than a train with goods timings. A train with goods timings, you'll get a very slow brake application and a very slow brake release. The reason is largely historic. A lot of older wagons only have the capability to run in goods timings, but when we have newer wagons, they're able to run in pass. But because we still have a mixture on the network, we have to have the option as to whether to run in goods or pass timings. There's a lot more to it. There's a whole section in the rulebook as to the ratio of wagons you can have in each set of timings. Class 4 trains, which are 75 mile an hour freight, can't run in goods timings. There's a whole lot more to it. I'm really oversimplifying it there. But basically, some wagons you drive will be in goods timings, some wagons will be in pass timings. And what we can do on the train is we can actually change it over. So as we can see there, brakes will use goods timings. You can't see because the lighting's coming right in at the cab, but the goods button is illuminated. The goods indicator is illuminated. These are not buttons, they're indicators. We can press pass, and then the pass, you can just about make it out, the pass is illuminated. So if we have a quick look at how that responds in the actual train, so we're currently in pass timings. What we're watching here is the bogies. So I'm going to release the train pipe, and we're watching at the speed at which the bogies release. And then if I make a full application, you can see they're coming up pretty quick, and a full release once again. They're dropping down pretty quick. So what I am going to do is I'm going to apply... No, I'm not. Don't worry about that. I'm talking nonsense. The train might start rolling in a second because we've got no brakes on. If we then switch into goods timings, brakes will use goods timings. If we then apply the brakes fully, if you watch the bogies, you'll notice now they are coming up a lot slower, like significantly slower. The reason for this was also because of Back in the day, you had unfitted freight trains basically with wagons without brakes on. And if you had a lot of brake force at the front of the train, the brakes would come hard on at the front of the train, and all the wagons at the back that didn't have brakes would just smash into the ones at the front. So the idea of good timings as well, if the brakes apply slowly and steadily at the front, the wagons at the back without brakes on then bunch up a lot nicer rather than just sort of smacking in. And obviously the wagons smacking in could cause derailments and all sorts. So if we release that as well, you're going to see again that the brakes, this is pretty good as well. The brakes do take an absolute age to apply and release in goods timings. So if you're driving the train in goods timings on Train Sim, when you put your brakes in, just bear in mind it's going to take a lot longer for them to apply and release. The brake timings, however, do not affect the direct brake or the locomotive brake. So the locomotive brake there, you can see we've used that and the brakes have come up really quickly. So it does not affect the locomotive brake, it only affects the train brake. So we'll put those back into pass for the minute. Slow speed I'll show you in just a few seconds, but the other thing I want to talk about, which is really well modelled, is the train length indicator. The purpose of the train length indicator is to tell us when the back of the train has passed a fixed point on the line, and we use this in real life all the time. It's a really, really useful aid. So I'll show you how this works in Train Sim World. This here is called the Data Cord 6100 operator interface. Pretty obvious that. And basically what we do in real life, this is where we enter as drivers we all have unique login numbers, and we enter our login number into here, and then it logs on the black box what driver's driving what train. And the managers are actually able to remotely download these as well. So if you have an incident, they can remotely download it, and because you're logged in, they'll know that you were driving. So all that's relevant to us in Train Sim World is the train length, which is also done on this screen here. So we press 1 for train length, and then we need to enter the length of our train. So press enter to edit. And our train length is indicated here in yards. Sometimes it's in meters, sometimes it's in yards. I know I said I wasn't going to draw real life comparisons, but in real life you would have something called a tops list, a train list, and it would have your length written on that piece of paper. General rule of thumb is to take your train length and time, if it's in yards or meters, times it by 3. On our train list, our train length is measured in something called SLU, SLU, which is standard length units, and there's 21 foot per SLU. But in Train Sim World, if you look at your train length there, basically times that by 3. So because I'm really lazy at maths, I'm going to round that up to 300 yards. So I'm just going to go 900 yards on this train. So 900. 900, enter. And now that's set our train length to 900 feet. And because we're just about to come over the junction here, I will show you kind of how that works in practice. So let's put the train into forward, release the brakes. And we will get the train moving. Our brakes are still in good timings by the looks of it. Yeah, so they're taking a little bit longer to release. I have done kind of a first look review of the 66 where I go into the actual driving side of it in a little bit more detail. So do go and check that video out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But I'm kind of just purely on this video, rather than showing you how to drive it or how I would drive it in real life, I'm just kind of showing you the features of the locomotive. So we get a little bit of speed up. I'm not too worried really about the speed at the moment. I just kind of want to show you how we use the train length indicator in a practical sense. So yeah, completely ignore my driving now. This is setting up for the tutorial that I'm not editing out, because I'm recording this on the fly, all in one take. No bloopers, maybe no bloopers, we'll see. So if you are enjoying this video, ladies and gentlemen, please do hit that like button and consider subscribing. That would be brilliant. And here we go. I'm going to show you how the train length indicator works now. So we are going to be 15 miles an hour across these points here. So I'm just going to drop a little bit of brake in and release that. And once we get clear of the points, our speed limit is going to go up to 45. And this is where your train length indicator comes in really, really useful. So the first thing we need to do, we've set up our length, we need to arm the train length indicator, and we arm it by pressing and holding it, and you'll hear a beep. There we go. And I've double pressed it as well, so let's reset that, because I've done that. I've done that completely wrong. That's my bad. Okay, so what we're supposed to do, it's my bad for not doing it, is we arm the train length indicator by pressing and holding the train length button, and we'll get a nice beep noise that comes up on the indicator. Once we go past the speed limit increase, or past the fixed point we want to measure from, we then press the button again, and it'll beep at you again. It will then start the countdown. As you can see, we're counting down up here. Once we've reached, the back of the train's reached that point, this will beep at you. And depending on what speed you're doing will depend on how many beeps you get. If you're going quite slow, you might get 3 or 4 beeps. If you're at a high speed, you'll only get 1 beep. And that is how we use the train length indicator. So if we just try that once again. Yeah, so press and hold to arm it and then press it to start it. It was already armed there because it had only just finished. I realise I'm making a bit of a hash of this tutorial at this point, but do have a play around with that, guys. It is 2 pushes, so the first push and hold, which will arm it, and then push to begin it, and you'll get beeps at each stage. But it's a really, really useful kind of nice feature on there as well. So we're going to stop the train there for a second. Again, I did say if you watch the 66 driver reviews, and I'll post a link to that, I kind of go more into the driving and how to drive it properly. This is a route that I signed in real life as well, so I can sort of kind of give you what I was expecting the train to do and what it done in the sim, and it's not too bad if I'm being honest. So the other thing we're going to look at is the slow speed menu on here. Locomotive must be set up into SSC mode, slow speed control mode. And what we do if we want to use the slow speed, it's basically like a cruise control system, but it only work to 10 miles an hour. So what we do is we press slow speed control on, as we can see there. Set speed, actual speed. We then use this rocker switch here to set our actual speed, our set speed. So if we set our speed to, let's set it to 3 miles an hour. There we go. We're going to press start up here, release our brakes, and apply the power. Now it doesn't matter how much power we apply, we are in the release position. The brakes are still coming off, that's why it's telling me that. There we go, fully released now. So I can give it notch 8 of power. Which I wouldn't advise doing because that's really not very good for the engine. And the slow speed control is going to maintain us at about 3 miles an hour. The one thing the slow speed cannot do is the slow speed cannot apply the brakes. So if you're going downhill, the train will pick up speed, and the slow speed cannot apply the brakes. So that's something to be mindful of. Generally speaking, in real life, we use the slow speed for propelling movements. There are sometimes when you propel back into yards and sidings, propelling movements of 5 miles an hour and 3 miles an hour. You might use it when shunting. If you're on a T3 worksite possession, it's 5 miles an hour, you might use it for that. Or the other time it's used is if you're doing hoppers. So if we go to certain power stations and other places, you've got hopper wagons that discharge at the bottom, and you're basically on a carousel, so the train never stops, and as the train goes over the discharge point, the hopper opens, automatically drops the load out, and then carries on. But you might set the speed to like 1 miles an hour, and the train will just keep going at that speed, which is really nice. So yeah, quite a nice feature, well modelled. Not exactly as it is in real life, but it does work quite well. So the one thing to remember with that, guys, is that the train will not slow itself down. It does not have the capability to apply the brakes. So if you are on a downhill gradient, it will pick up speed, and that's exactly as it is in real life. You can exit your slow speed. Press your stop button there. Once you press your stop button, slow speed controls are off. Motors come up, and the train is starting to move away. There we go. So we're going to stop the train just there. So a couple of the other things to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else, is a few things on the outside of the train. I probably should have done this in a yard because this is not good practice. So the only other things you're kind of going to want to know that are relevant to the operation of the train, you've got various lighting switches here: cab light, desk light, instrument lights, tail lights. The tail lights, I'm just going to check this. Yeah, the tail lights are actually modelled incorrectly, because on the Class 66, and I know I'm drawing comparisons again and I apologise for that, on the 66 the tail light switch would work the local tail lights, so the one in this cab would work the tail lights at this end, and the one on the other end the tail lights at the other end. However, what's happened in Train Sim, and I have advised the devs of this, is that the tail light switches are opposites. So the tail light switch in this cab is working the tail lights in the back cab, and then vice versa. That is how it's done in other locomotives, such as I know the 37 works like that as well. It's like a remote tail light operation, but that's not correct for the 66. But never mind. So yeah, you've got your tail lights, your lights there. You've got hazard light switch, which is fully operational. As you can see there, the lights, if we jump to the outside, the lights flashing. We have got tail... Oh, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so our tail lights are on because... Yeah, the tail lights are on in the back cab. They must be turned on in the back cab, which is why they're showing up here. Yes, you've got your hazard lights operation there, your hazard lights flashing. And we'd typically use that if there was a train coming in the opposite direction. If there was a hazard on the track and we needed to stop a train in an emergency, we could put our hazard lights on. If you're driving your train along and you see a train with flashing lights on it, first thing you do is chuck your emergency brakes in and bring the train to a stand very, very quickly. So in terms of your cab, you've got your horn and you've got your sander toggle there as well, which lays sand down on the track. So that is pretty much it in terms of the cab. You've got brake overcharge. So brake overcharge, you're not really ever going to need that in game, but that would form part of your static brake test. Once you've completed your static brake test, you would use the brake overcharge in order to equalise all the brake distributors on the wagons. But I'll talk a bit more about that when I do the kind of in-depth real-life comparison video. So the only other thing jumping out the train now is on the outside. Wallop. Over the third rail, don't do this in real life. Is on the front of the train you have a choice of couplers. You've got a Buckeye coupling and you've also got a standard hook coupling there. And there are scenarios depending on the wagons and what you're doing that you will need to change those over, and that's just a simple click on them. In the right place. There we go. So that's your Buckeye coupling, that's your hook, screw hook coupling, and it's exactly the same on the back of the locomotive, as we can see there. All uncoupled. Click to couple. There we go, guys. So that is kind of the full tutorial from a static point of view of the Class 66. Do let me know what you thought of the video, guys. This is the first time I've kind of done a tutorial. I've kind of tried to break it up into beginner and sort of more advanced stuff. Hopefully I haven't tripped over my words too much and I haven't overly complicated it, so hopefully you've been able to follow. Yeah, I know there will be people in the comment section that are sort of doing comparisons with this is not realistic and that's not realistic, and there are elements of the train that are not, of the loco, that are not completely realistic, but it's a very, very big improvement on what we had in Train Sim World 2. It's extremely playable, and actually it's really nice to play, it's enjoyable. Which is the main thing. But if you do kind of want to know, like I say, about the real life comparisons, so in the real life video we're kind of going to do like an outside check. I'm going to explain what all the things are on the outside of the train that we're looking for, what we'd be looking for going through the engine room, basically doing a full prep on the locomotive and sort of telling you how it compares in Train Sim to real life. Then I will publish that video very soon. If you're watching this in a few weeks' time, who knows? There's no timescale on videos, is there? If I've published it, there's a link in the description. So, yeah, hopefully you have enjoyed the video, guys. If you have, please do hit that like button and consider subscribing. That would be absolutely brilliant. You can also follow me on my social media channels, which are on the screen for you right now. And we also have a community Discord server where we talk about trains, aviation, buses, and just general chit-chatter. We've got a few competitions going on over there. And if you want to find out more about that, you will find a link in the description below. So, like I say, guys, do hope you've really enjoyed the video. Do hope you've learnt something. If there's anything I've missed, do let me know. And I hope to see you very soon in a live stream or a video. Thanks for watching.